the soil of the soul. I grew up in farm country in upstate New York, and every summer there was a saying you heard over and over again, knee high by the 4th of July. Farmers would say it at the diner, they'd say it, leaning against pickup trucks, they'd say it while standing at the edge of a field looking out over rows and rows and rows of corn. Knee high by the 4th of July. It wasn't just a catchy expression, it was a hopeful measuring stick, actually. If the corn had reached knee height by the 4th of July, there was a good chance of a healthy harvest and maybe even enough growing season left to get in another crop before the first frost. Now, as a kid, I just thought the miracle happened in July. I thought the corn simply decided one day to grow. But farmers know better. By the time those green stalks reached your knees, the real work had already been happening for months. Someone had prepared the soil. Someone had planted the seed. The spring rains had come. The roots had been quietly growing underground long before anyone could see a single green shoot. The visible growth was simply the result of all the invisible work that had come before it. I wonder if that's why Jesus loved telling stories about seeds. When most of us hear this parable, we immediately start asking ourselves, which kind of soil am I? Am I the rocky ground? Am I the thorny soil? We all want to find a way to make ourselves into the good soil, I think. And for years, that's exactly how I heard it too. It became one more spiritual report card. One more opportunity to wonder whether I was doing enough, believing enough, growing enough. But the older I get, the more I think Jesus may be asking a different question. Not what kind of soil are you, but what kind of life are you cultivating? Because here's something I've noticed. None of us wakes up one morning and decides to become more impatient or feel more fearful or more cynical. Those things grow quietly, don't they? One habit at a time, one conversation at a time, one headline at a time. One scroll on our phone at a time, one anxious thought at a time. Whatever consistently receives our attention slowly begins shaping the landscape of our hearts. In a very real sense, our attention becomes the soil of our souls. Jesus talks about seed falling on a path, on rocky ground, among thorny weeds, and finally, on good soil. But notice something here. He never criticizes the seed. The seed is always good. The invitation isn't to manufacture better seed. The invitation is to tend the conditions where life can flourish. Think about that old saying, knee high by the 4th of July. No farmer ever walked into the field on the 3rd day of July and tugged on the corn to make it another inch taller. That would be ridiculous. You can't force growth. You can only create the conditions where growth becomes possible, where the nurture happens. Maybe that's one of the reasons why so many of us become discouraged. We live in a culture based, obsessed with visible growth. More followers, more successes, more productivity, more achievement, more. And Jesus seems much more interested in something else, in roots, in receptivity, patience. attention, space. And that's why I find one part of this story especially interesting. Jesus says some of the seed fell among thorny weeds, and the weeds crowded out the plants. Crowded them out. The weeds weren't evil. They weren't bad. They just crowded everything else out. Doesn't that sound familiar? It does to me. How many of us aren't living bad lives? We're simply living crowded ones. Crowded calendars, crowded minds, crowded schedules, crowded expectations, even crowded hearts, I think. Sometimes it isn't that love has disappeared, it's that it hasn't had enough room to grow. And the same could be said of compassion, or joy, or patience, or hope, or forgiveness. This month of July at Firebird Spirit, our community has been reflecting on rest, listening, and integration. Those aren't simply spiritual practices. They're ways of tending the soil, our own soil, the soil of our lives. Every time we choose stillness instead of constant noise, every time we truly listen instead of immediately reacting, every time we make room for one meaningful conversation instead of 100 passing opinions, we are preparing the ground. We are enriching the healthy soil, preparing it to receive the seeds we want to grow. And here's the wonderful news. The farmer scatters seeds everywhere, not just where success seems likely. I find comfort in that. The sacred is extravagantly generous. Love keeps being offered. Wisdom keeps being offered. Compassion, hope, light, love, they all keep being offered. They're scattered to us again and again and again. The question has never been whether the sacred is still sowing seeds. The question is whether we've become open enough to notice them and nurture the seeds that the sacred is already sowing in our lives. Whether we've made enough room to receive those seeds. So maybe we leave here today with a different question than the one we often ask ourselves. Instead of asking, how much have I accomplished? Maybe we ask, what kind of soil am I tending? Because the deepest things in life rarely grow overnight. You can measure corn by the 4th of July. You can't measure compassion that way. You can't measure wisdom by the calendar. You can't rush healing. You can't hurry trust. Those things grow quietly, often beneath the surface, long before anyone notices. I still smile when I hear those old words, knee-high by the 4th of July. They remind me that healthy things grow quietly, that roots matter just as much as results, probably more. They remind me that life is always doing more beneath the surface than we can see, and they remind me that the sacred has never stopped sowing seeds in our lives. So our invitation is simply to keep making room for them to take root and grow. Amen.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to a Firebird Reflection from Firebird Spirit, where the sacred meets the real. To explore more reflections and our weekly online gatherings, visit www.firebirdspirit.org or subscribe to Firebird Spirit Hope here on YouTube. Together we rise, together we'll fly. Until next time, take good care, and bye for now.